Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Deadpool 2. With the first Deadpool, that movie was obviously sort of commenting on the superhero genre, and particularly the origin story movie, which pretty much every superhero franchise has to do, which is the first movie. They're all kind of structured the same. We know how they're going to flow. We know how it's going to be, and it's an easy thing to make fun of, and particularly with that genre, it's something we all sort of have to begrudgingly sit through because we want to see them do the cooler stuff that more of the issues that we actually know them for in the sequels. Now, the thing with the sequels is, with any superhero movie, is they're not like a certain path necessarily that everyone follows. And I think that's where Deadpool 2 kind of gets in a little bit of trouble, and also kind of shows you what kind of movie this really is, in fact. Now, the first Deadpool, I think, was kind of verging on being a parody of superhero genre, certainly, but I think 2 sort of just is the genre. And that's certainly something, that line that Deadpool, I think, rode pretty well to me. Honestly, it just felt like I was watching superhero movie origin story just with like funny gags in it. But you could at least make the case that was a parody of some kind or something. Whereas in the second one, it's just like not there as much. Now, I think that speaks more to second superhero movies and the fact that there isn't a genre blueprint of what that exactly should be. And since Deadpool isn't taking like a very famous storyline from the comic books, he isn't doing a parody of various other big superhero sequels. They're kind of doing their own thing with Deadpool in the second one, but at the same time it almost feels like they sort of didn't know exactly where to take him. They just kind of did a sequel because it's successful, but theoretically they didn't know what to do with this character in a sequel, which is sort of the thing with this. I still think it's a really enjoyable, fun movie. I probably laughed more actually at this one than the first one. I'm not a huge Deadpool movie fan, at least. I'm fine with the character. I wasn't like as passionate about the first one as most people are, and I think in the second one it kind of comes into the problem that certainly like the Iron Man franchise had, where it almost feels like you sort of said everything in the first one and the other sequels don't really know where to take the character at all, and thus why none of the sequels are anywhere near as impactful. Kind of the same thing with the RoboCop franchise. RoboCop is like a near perfect movie. 2 and 3 are dog shit. Now Iron Man 3 is enjoyable to a certain degree, but it's kind of hard to know where to take the character necessarily after a certain point. And what are you going to have Deadpool 2 do other than just kind of be like more and more excessive and sillier and more violent? And I think Deadpool 2 works within that kind of guise. It actually works really well within that kind of guys, to be honest. I think certainly with the director like David Leitch and Ryan Reynolds kind of writing his own star vehicle with these Deadpool movies, it does make it really, really fun. You know, it is a very typical kind of summer sequel blockbuster type of a thing, where it's an enjoyable kind of sugary rush while you're watching it. But then like in the fall, you're probably not as into it, but then, you know, when you'll get it on DVD or Blu-ray or streaming now, I guess, or whatever, when it's on Thanksgiving and you've had too much food, you'll enjoy like sitting back and watching it with your cousins and laughing over it. And that's kind of what this is. And those kind of movies are really good at what they do and can be a really fun time. And I think Deadpool 2 does that. On a theoretical level, it's sort of empty because there's not anything left to say with this character. Like, what are you in fact saying with Deadpool? Like, in the original, you're commenting on superhero movies. You're having this guy break the fourth wall and be snarky and do this Bugs Bunny thing. And there's a difference between where you have a Bugs Bunny cartoon that makes a point with his persona, and then there's one where it's just Bugs Bunny being Bugs Bunny. And in a lot of cases, that's what Deadpool 2 is. It's Deadpool being Deadpool again. And maybe I should be okay with that. I'm sure most of you who saw Deadpool 2 were, because that's what you wanted to see. You wanted to see him make mad wisecracks just like you do, or crack mad wise, or however the kids say it. I still really like Ryan Reynolds in the role of Deadpool. It's kind of interesting that he doesn't do other kind of star vehicle things between. I guess the Hitman's Bodyguard sorta is, but like why he isn't writing more scripts with other people. Maybe as I didn't see Hitman's Bodyguard, maybe he's a writing credit, I don't know. But like it seems interesting to me that he seems to be much more famous for this character than individually. You know, it's not like, I mean, he picks like, I think he has like really bad taste in terms of picking projects, so that's like sort of part of the problem. But through the Deadpool character, he can almost like truly be himself and be this like merc with a mouth kind of character, and he's like really good at it. As a superhero kind of performance, is probably one of the better superhero performances around. I actually like what they do with their version of Colossus. It's not like the version of Colossus I necessarily like, but I'm sort of getting used to this character. Josh Brolin as Cable kind of plays within the character's ridiculousness, but he almost understands how he's playing that for a specific reason for this kind of a film. I'm kind of getting sick of Josh Brolin using time travel in superhero movies. I'm wondering if that is involved in Sicario 2 at this point. ZZB2 was, I've seen in Atlanta, and I've thought she was a good actress before. I thought brought a lot of charisma to Domino. In particular, I really actually liked her quite a bit, and the fact that she's staying around I think is going to be really cool. I think there's a lot of things with this movie that are spoilers, and so I'm going to talk about them in more of a spoiler section thing, because I can't really get into that because I don't want to spoil it, because it was fun, and I actually did not spoil a lot of that shit for myself, which was kind of neat. But before I get into spoilers, one of the things about this film is it's directed by David Leitch, who's a director I quite like. I like John Wick 2, and Atomic Blonde, and I love the action sequences and how well he staged those action sequences within that film. Those films feel like David Leitch directed movies, like that style, the very clear action sequence, very kind of beautiful neon lights and all those things. Atomic Blonde feels like it's made by the people who made John Wick. Deadpool 2 feels like a Deadpool movie. It doesn't feel like a David Leitch film. This is more of a work for hire film from him than it is like one of his, I guess you could say, auteur kind of films. And that's fine, I guess, but it's sort of like what I expected the Hollywood system to do with someone like him, is like chew him up and spit him out later, and hopefully maybe he can make a film that's like, you know, the kind of things that are why I originally was so interested in what he was doing with John Wick and Atomic Blonde and stuff. Also, his handle on story seems to really be coming back to haunt him more and more throughout his filmography, whereas John Wick had a very simplistic story which really worked within its own action genre thing. I think John Wick 2 expanded upon the story, but the story wasn't as tight necessarily, but you're like, oh, that's fine. Atomic Blonde's story didn't make any fucking sense and was frankly a little stupid, but the action sequences were so cool you didn't mind. And then you get to Deadpool 2, and I'm like, well, it is very funny. It feels like he's getting to be a worse and worse filmmaker as his filmography is going on, particularly when it comes to story. It feels like he has a less and less handle on the story than someone like Tim Miller did with the original, who seemed to really construct a really like well-suited, kind of well-constructed kind of story to the most part. You know, he understood the real theme of it was Deadpool and Vanessa, and in this it's like Deadpool and like this fat kid or something, and X-Force is involved. It like just was very murky in that. And it didn't feel like David Leitch really like was more interested in like kind of letting Ryan Reynolds almost have creative control. I'm not saying that because of, you know, what happened with him and Tim Miller. I'm more saying that as like what I observed from it just felt like, you know, Deadpool was in charge of Deadpool movie, and David Leitch was there to kind of just make sure the circus kind of kept running on time. And that's really what he did here. Some of the action sequences you could see more of a flair to it than what Tim Miller did, but not enough that it's really worth having someone like David Leitch do a film like this. You know, I sort of don't get like hiring hot directors to sort of just do what you want them to do. Like, why don't you get like anyone then? Why does it fucking matter if you get a director like this? It seems a little silly to me personally, but like whatever. I just didn't think he was maybe well utilized within this film. But I think if you like Deadpool and you want to see Deadpool do his kind of, you know, crack mad wise and be silly and ridiculous and self-referential, then this film will not disappoint. But if you're looking for something to kind of insinuate that there might be a deeper meaning behind this movie, which it kind of moves to a conclusion that's sort of laughable that it tries to pull off, particularly in this day and age when you really think about it, none of that really works. But to see like Deadpool, you know, make wisecracks and shoot people and be really violent, then this film definitely doesn't disappoint in what it's aiming to do, and I think actually succeeds in what it's aiming to do, because it's honestly not really asking for that much more than what it's really presenting to you. Is spoilers. Don't watch this. If you don't want to be spoiled on a movie you've probably already seen, because we're reviewing this late. So, Deadpool 2 spoilers. So, first off, all of X-Force dies really quickly. I thought that was actually a pretty clever gag. We've had like all these tons and tons of trailers and selling like this is gonna be X-Force and these are the people in it, and then everybody but Domino dies really quickly, and that was like a lot of fun. I thought they actually had some fun with the trailers and like their perception of the movie going in and played around with it. Was very clever. You don't see a lot of like Hollywood superhero movies doing that. It's like we know so much about these things before they happen. It's almost like you can never get surprised. This film actually pulled off a lot of surprises, which kind of gets more into being like a big spectacle summer movie sequel, which it played into that hand very well. Particularly like the blink and you'll miss it Brad Pitt thing, which was like sort of funny, but it's also like I don't know if I like give a shit much about Brad Pitt. I guess I'm fine with it, but like whatever. I like the particularly end credit thing with the Hugh Jackman cameo and all that. I thought was particularly funny and all that stuff. It sort of has, I've heard people say it reminded them of what they did at the end of 22 Jump Street in the credits of that, which I definitely feel that within it. Everything with the plot involving the Essex house, which I guess is something that they're building in the X universe or not. I'm not think they mentioned at the end of X-Men Apocalypse. I'm sure you all remember that, but they did. And like what they're doing with that, was this what happens with that? I guess I don't know. It did feel like, particularly the end with the time travel thing, that they sort of kind of made all the stakes of this film sort of like not matter, which is like weird that seems to be between Infinity War and this, that like they have these high stakes things and then they go, well, okay, we're not really gonna do that. And you're like, what? Then why did you do that to me? What the fuck? That just felt a little annoying, because it's like I thought we are gonna have this character evolve, and it feels like, you know, well, he experienced these things, so he sort of evolved, and it's like, yeah, but that's not like really evolving. I just don't think it really works in that way. Deadpool 2, I think, with all its surprises and with its spoilers, does go into the idea of this being a big fun summer movie sequel, but it is good at it. You know, people are talking about the cameos. Like, I didn't really care that much about a Deadpool 2 sequel, to be frank about it, but I was curious what these, you know, kind of cameos were going to be. The X-Men cameo was really funny. It like actually made me care about wanting to see the Deadpool sequel, because of like I don't want it to be ruined for me, despite the fact that I don't really care as much. Cable was a big character for me growing up. I do agree, like, there's no way you could really do him at this point, particularly in this day and age. I thought he played well within the kind of framework of this. I generally, I think I had a decent enough time. I'm not crazy about this character or anything. It's kind of like I had a good afternoon at the movies with Deadpool 2, but it's not like a film I'm really taking seriously or probably ever going to see again or think about much. Just kind of a nice flighty little sequel that had some fun and some surprises and some violence and all the things like that you know, I frankly expected from it. Maybe the action sequences were a little better than the last one, but they weren't better enough to like warrant David Leitch doing it, frankly. Typical kind of what you'd expect for a Deadpool 2. I think one of the things that's interesting about this film is I heard before it came out that Ryan Reynolds was already saying that they make a third one, because I think it's Deadpool 2 and then X-Force, which I'm a little curious, like, so is X-Force like Negasonic Teenage Warhead, who's her girlfriend, which also, by the way, it's actually cool that it wasn't like, hey, you know, we wrote this character as gay, but they're like actually not in any of the scenes for the movie that we filmed or that the actor knew about and things. But they actually had a gay superhero in this, was actually pretty cool. Negasonic Teenage Warhead and her girlfriend. But is this group, this is X-Force, or like what's the tone of X-Force going to be? Is it just going to be like Deadpool-ish, or like wasn't this sort of like an X-Force movie but it wasn't? Like, I'm confused about that. But Ryan Reynolds said that if he makes a third Deadpool movie, he wants it to be cheaper like the original, kind of understanding that like going, you know, these bigger, more excessive sequels isn't necessarily going to work in the long term, which I'd actually agree with. I don't think, yeah, a third one at this kind of budget level with this doesn't sound as interesting to me. An X-Force movie doesn't sound interesting to me either. It just feels like we're like, we don't really know what the point is at this point. I guess we're just keeping this thing running because it's so uberly successful. And I think Deadpool 2, it's one of those sequels where you're like fine with it, but I don't think it'll like make much of an impact in the long term, specifically like the original Deadpool did. You know, I think they're gonna have to work a little harder before they have like a real quality franchise. Right now they just have like a big first movie, and this feels like if they're going to turn out a bunch of sequels like this, I don't know if the franchise will really live up to the first one. It'll feel like people will still talk about the first one and they made all these sequels or whatever. And I think this one kind of points to more of there being a bunch of sequels or whatever than pointing to a real promising franchise. You know, unless you just want to see Deadpool crack mad wise, then I guess you'd probably be satisfied with this. So if you've seen Deadpool 2 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. 11th X-Men movie. I didn't realize that Logan was the 10th. That's kind of fitting.